Um, Hi everyone. Sorry, I am presenting from my car because I had another extension event today. Um, I am the only presenter on tonight at the moment, so I'm gonna go ahead and present, and hopefully a couple of our other presenters will get on by the time I am done. Can everyone hear me okay? So tonight I am going to be talking about poinsettias. If you have not heard me speak before, my name is Madalyn Shires, and I am our SDSU Extension Plant Pathologist, and I'm also the director of the Plant Diagnostic Clinic on campus. And so I work with diseases, and that is kind of my jam. All right, so tonight I'm going to be talking about poinsettias. Since I am your plant pathologist, your plant disease person, there's probably a reason for me to be talking about this plant. So we all know and love poinsettias as our favorite flowers at Christmas. And so now I have a story to tell you about how poinsettias came to be. So a brief history about poinsettias. They are actually native to Mexico and Central America, and that is kind of their native range. It has been well documented that the Aztec Indians began cultivation and breeding of the poinsettias. So they were looking for better tree size, better colors, better branching. Poinsettias were first introduced to the United States in the early 1800s. And I think it was like 1823 or so, if I remember correctly. And as you can see there, the person that introduced them was Joel Robert Poinsett. He had the plants sent back to his greenhouse in South Carolina because he just really adored them. And so he had a bunch of different varieties of poinsettias that he collected from Mexico and other areas and sent back to the United States. Poinsettias were always adored and loved. And once they kind of got into the US and got really popular, that is actually when they went from being considered or called by other names to being called poinsettias in honor of this guy that actually introduced them to the country. And poinsettias really took off after they had some structural changes occurring in in the early 1920s. Um, Once these new and improved poinsettias that are shorter and bushier and prettier kind of took uh, over that's when they really started blooming in the US market and really kind of started becoming that mainstream, really well loved Christmas plant. So if you don't know, in native environments, poinsettias are known to be shrubs and trees. That's actually how they're described, as nice, bushy, 6, 8 foot tall shrubs and trees. In the 1920s, like I mentioned before, that's when the structure of poinsettias began to change. They became smaller, they became more branched, they became dwarfed. And you can actually see the comparison here on this slide between a restricted, which is what they call the taller ones, and the free branching, which is the one that we know today. So the question of why did that happen? Plant disease. So actually there is a plant disease called a phytoplasma, and they are responsible for causing the look and size of our poinsettias that we all know and adore. It's believed that the phytoplasma infected some poinsettia plants that were being cultivated when they were being grown in California, where that phytoplasma is native. Most phytoplasmas are insect spread. You may have also heard of phytoplasmas in the case of aster yellows, or if you've heard me speak before, you might have heard me talk about little cherry disease or X disease. Phytoplasmas cause abnormal branching, bushiness, and stunted growth. Um, if you've not heard of a phytoplasma before, they are a wall-less round bacteria. They live in the plant phloem or the plant sap. They are very similar to a plant virus and lifestyle. They're flow unlimited. They have to have a host to survive. And you can sometimes get them out of plants through heat treatments because they are sensitive to heat. So, how did we even figure this out? Um, like I mentioned before, we do heat treatments to plants, usually to get rid of viruses so that we can export plants because most countries have various viruses that have to be eradicated before the plants can be sent to other areas. And so scientists and plant breeders heat treated these plants. And what happened is the phytoplasma reverted back to the normal kind. It went back to this, shrubby tree looking thing. And so then they were said, okay, well, this must mean that it's a virus that is causing our desirable poinsettia traits. So they grafted the infected buds onto a heat clean plant, and they actually got the bushy, shrubby, or the bushy looking poinsettias. And so as genetics progressed, we were able to verify that it was actually a phytoplasma, not a virus. And we did that through transmission studies, PCR testing, and microscopy. So you may say, "Oh, I bring a plant disease into my house every year. Does that pose a risk?" And the great news is no. This phytoplasma is extremely host selective. It only really likes poinsettias. And it has also been in poinsettias for so long that it no longer has it's no longer transmissible by insects. So it's actually lost that part of its genome and it can only be transmitted through grafting or daughter. And it's very, very host specific, and that's just what our diseases will do sometimes. So in summary, our modern day poinsettias are the result of a plant disease, and it's a plant disease that we bring into our house every year. The plant disease is not dangerous to other plants, and it's one of those times where plant diseases make plants more attractive and more desirable, much like a lot of our variegated plants have viruses that makes them more desirable. Um, yeah, sorry, my talk's a little short. I wasn't expecting to be the only one talking tonight. Um, but here's my contact info, and yeah, I guess if there's any questions about poinsettias or other plant disease stuff, I can try to field them. And if not, I am thinking that we're just going to have a very short garden hour tonight. Okay, so Reagan asked, can you expand more on what a photoplasma is? Yeah, so photoplasmas, much like any of our other plant diseases, they are pretty selective about the plants that they live in, and they kind of have a set of symptoms that every phytoplasma causes. So if you've seen aster yellows before, it causes the plants to get bushy. It causes them to have abnormal coloring. And so with this phytoplasma, it is just a round bacteria. So if just any bacteria, if you think about a human bacteria or a plant, they're all the same thing. So it's a round bacteria that is moved from plant to plant by leaf hoppers. So we have little leaf hoppers that feed with their stylet. And so they pick those phytoplasma up in their stylet, and then they deposit them into additional plants as they feed. So once that phytoplasma ends up into plants, it pushes its way through the plant phloem system and eventually goes and infects the roots. And then it systemically infects the entire plant. So phytoplasma diseases have to be treated much like viral diseases. In the case of once a plant's infected, you can't eradicate that disease. The plant is always going to be infected, and the best management for a phytoplasma positive plant is to remove it. Hopefully that kind of answered your question. Couple of questions about colors. So the colors are heavily influenced through breeding selections, not so much the phytoplasma. I think the phytoplasma does probably play a role in some of the shades of colors that we see, but overall, the colors of poinsettias are going to come from plant breeding and from just them having that natural variation. All the old history that I've read about poinsettias is that they just had kind of that natural variation, a lot of different shades of reds and pinks and oranges, and that was the reason they were so desirable even way back in the 13, 14, 1500s. How does a phytoplasma someone asked, how does a phytoplasma infected poinsettia present itself? How will we know if it's an infected plant? So the fun fact is every single poinsettia that you purchase from the store has this phytoplasma. The commercial standard is poinsettias that are infected with this phytoplasma. It's not because it's not dangerous to any other plants. It is actually just accepted within the plant trade as a trait that the plants are sold with. And if you'll have any other questions, I'm happy to answer any other disease questions. And if not, I think we'll probably call it good for the night. Thank you all for getting on and listening. And I know you were probably all waiting to hear John Ball talk about Christmas trees. But hopefully you learned a little bit of something about poinsettias and plant diseases tonight. Okay, well, I think we are done for the night. So thank you all so much for attending. And I believe the next one is sometime in February. So make sure you hop on then to hear about whatever's going on in the plant world by February.